Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 5 of HBO's Industry, entitled Company Man. On the surface, I think this title directly refers to Robert, as he's caught in a struggle between protecting Pierpoint's best interest or Henry Muck's, even though it becomes clear that Pierpoint is setting him up to take the fall for this, or at best they see him as disposable. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about Robert in detail a little bit later, including more on this government hearing that takes place, because Robert goes on quite a journey in this episode. But then you have to wonder, what is in his own best interest? Is it to be the company man that they want him to be? Or is he starting to understand that any loyalty that he shows is only going to go one way? It's not going to go the other. And I think it's the latter. But I also think the title is a little bit more all-encompassing than that as well. We see several characters showing how much of a company man or woman that they are. Sweet Pea, she tries to do the right thing by alerting Yasmin and Eric about the impending disaster that she's discovered. And yes, I'm going to talk about that too. And that makes her a proper company woman, right? But then look at how Yasmin and Eric respond to this information. Both brush her off, but we know Eric is a company man, right? He's of course going to look into this, and he reaches out to Adler like as soon as Sweet Pea leaves the room and gets confirmation eventually of everything that she said. I'm going to talk about the Adler scene more later as well, but I think it's meant to be ambiguous here, whether or not Eric is crying over Adler's cancer or over the potential end of his own career. And if he was crying over the potential collapse of Pierpoint, I think it even goes beyond, like, I'm sad about this because I'm a company man. Like, remember, Eric's dealing with a lot of personal shit, family shit. Like, what happens with his wife and kids if he becomes jobless? But everything I mentioned so far was very well done. And it's only a fraction of the great work that this episode did. As the comparisons to Succession continue to mount, they become increasingly more valid. The writing here is just exceptional this week. The show continues to impress me by repeatedly taking these unexpected turns, but just because the turns were unexpected, at least by me, that doesn't mean the show hasn't laid the groundwork for them. It absolutely has. And then you have Robert. I've been beating the Robert is the best character on the show drum for quite some time now. And after this episode, how can you not agree? Like, he's the most complex character. He's evolved the most. And man, thank God for subtitles, because I wouldn't understand a word he says without them. But Harry Lawdy, I'm assuming that's how his last name is pronounced. He's the actor who plays Robert. He was incredible in this episode, man. He was every bit as good in this episode as Rishi was in the last one. They're just in different ways. I'm no actor, obviously, but you have to think, it's really hard. It's got to be really hard to play someone who is both incredibly nervous and simultaneously trying to show themselves as keeping it together. Like, how do you showcase both of those things? I don't know how you do it, but I know I fucking saw it. Like, the vomit in the sink, the trembling of the hands, little things like putting on those glasses that they gave him, or how he drank or poured his water, how he kept starting to answer the question even though he was repeatedly told to refer to his statement, but then how he snapped out of it when it was mentioned that Henry was dating a Pierpoint employee. Real quick diversion here. That's one of the things this show does incredibly well right now, and it was Succession's strong point too. One of Succession's strong points. Like, Robert has denied being anything more than friends with Yasmin to both Eric and Henry. But that moment during the questioning was a clue as to how he really feels. And the show has been, like, dropping clues like that all season. Like Succession, as I've said this many times, and this is just another example, this show is really good at giving you only, like, the bare fucking minimum that you need in order to understand what's going on. You're gonna have to read between the lines, or you're gonna have to do a little bit of thinking, a little mental homework in order to get the full picture. And I really appreciate being treated that way as a viewer. But back to Harry Lawdy's performance. You get that portion of the episode, right, where he's playing all of these emotions, either simultaneously or back to back. Like, 1 minute, he's doing the nervous, trying to keep it all together thing at the hearing, stuttering through that. Then the next, he's quickly coming to the realization of how he's being led out to pasture by Pierpoint, and he's angry. But then later in the episode, he's now playing this measure of, like, understanding and what I think I would call something like peace. It's almost like he sees the futility of it all when Aurora and Henry's uncles that are, he's in the room where it happens, just plotting out the future. He understands that Pierpoint and Eric would sell him out in a minute. And then he does a dream sequence as if that's not enough. Like, man, this guy is doing it all this week. This dream sequence, it gives us some insight into his subconscious and how he views the job, as well as his issues with his mother and the part that played in his relationship with Nicole. I think we reached, I think when we reach the end of the episode and he's looking in the mirror, and I think he's not seeing a monster in that moment, as Henry told him that he saw when he looked in the mirror. I think Robert has reached some sort of epiphany in that moment. I don't know what, but he felt very at peace in that moment to me. He probably expected to see a monster when he looked in the mirror. That's why there's the slow look up, because that may be how he views himself. And he was probably relieved not to see that. And I think for him, that signals like a turn in his character, like his conscience, and how he's starting to feel good with the man that he's become. But I don't know, man. All I know right now is y'all can't front on Harry Lottie, man. Robert continues to be a great character, man. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there, since it's the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not going to lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. So now let's get into the narrative and talk about what exactly happened with Robert and this government select committee. So last episode, before it all became about Rishi, we found out the potential for someone to have to go to speak in front of this committee. Robert himself asked if he might have to go, well, which was an indication to me that he absolutely would. And sure enough, that's what happens this week. And they tell him that he's not on trial and it's not about him. But Robert's like, I can't really tell if this lawyer is here for me or if he's here for Pierpoint. And then, like I alluded to earlier, we of course later hear Eric say outright that he sees Robert as expendable. So Robert shows up to this hearing, and this lady, I believe I heard her name was Dern. She immediately starts going off on him about Pierpoint overvaluing Lumi. She says he was called Sir Henry's whipping boy, and then she's like, well, but personally to me, and I'm like, why are you interjecting your own personal shade to him into this professional hearing? But she's like, to me, you must be Pierpoint's whipping boy since they hanging you out to dry. And like, man, Robert, man, he's just sitting there like, what the fuck have I got myself into? Like trying to get through this situation and forgetting to just refer to his statement. So let's talk about what happened in this scene. So we learned last week that Lumi collapsed. In these hearing scenes, we learned that they were bailed out by the government. So now, essentially, this committee or whatever is here to pretty much, they're pretty much on some shit like, this shit costs the taxpayers mad money, so who the fuck is responsible? Is it Muck for being a crook? Is it Pierpoint for being misleading about Lumi's value? Or is it the government for bailing out a shitty company with a crooked CEO who fucks his employees? And so Robert's there on behalf of Pierpoint. Muck is supposed to be there to defend himself, but he shows up late. And then Aurora, who we know from last season, she gave Gus a job, and we've seen her earlier this season as well. She shows up on behalf of the government. Aurora ends up taking full responsibility, says the government should have done their due diligence, and that's on her, and then informs everyone that she has already resigned from her post. Like, shame. Like, I'm completely responsible, and I'm ashamed of myself, so I've already quit. Don't even worry about me. But not so fast. When Muck and Robert meet up with Muck's uncles, Aurora arrives and is greeted as like, hey, future prime minister, and we all come to understand that all of this has been orchestrated. She's going to look like some wholesome petition with values, who does the right thing and accepts responsibility when things go wrong. One of Muck's uncles, the one who's not Otto Mostyn, I don't know, I feel like they never say this guy's name. I think he wrote the tabloid or some shit, and it sounds like they're going to be putting out like these positive stories like propaganda, just to kind of put a positive spin on her, put out ideas that she could be prime minister. Essentially, these folks got in a room and they plotted out a path for her to be prime minister. And Robert really was essentially worked up over nothing. Like, this thing is going to go away. Like, there won't be any criminal charges against him. But let's get back to the hearing, because that's not everything that happened at the hearing. So Yasmin's watching the hearing on her phone in the bathroom. And now that I say that, it really is remarkable how many pivotal scenes take place in a bathroom on this show. But she both sees Robert's response to the info that Henry is dating a Pierpoint employee, and she herself learns that Henry essentially did all the same shit with Katie. I think she's his assistant. She's the one that he made get to the back of the plane in the episode where he had sex with Yasmin at the end. And I think we're meant to understand that moment where Muck sends her to the back of the plane just so he could fuck Yasmin was the breaking point that caused Katie to give up this information. To top that off, when Yasmin confronts Muck about this while he's high, he let slip too loudly that she peed on him, and that same scumbag dude from earlier that was hitting on her and just keeps making weird fucking comments, he's like, you got somebody else to piss on you? Like, damn, Henry, you out here, bro. And that sends Yasmin over the edge. She flips the table. It's like, that's what they do when they get mad. Real quick, though, about the pee scene, Henry says several times, I'm not a pervert. And he gives this real psychological sounding reason for why he wants her to do this. And finding out that he did all this with Katie and likely many others, it's almost frightening how calmly he said that shit to Yaz. It's like he's got like a whole speech rehearsed that he just says to every woman just to get her to pee on him. And a large part of that is, hey, I'm not a pervert. It's this other reason. But anyway, moving on. Another drum that I've been banging for as long, if not longer, than the Robert is the best character drum is my Yasmin has not grown or evolved one bit drum. Yasmin has continued to only have value as the woman who fucks, or in this case, pees. I'm still in awe at how anyone could think she's a standout character on this show. Like, we're midway through season 3 and she's still terrible at her job and as a person. And her character arc just always involves fucking someone, like often multiple people. But there has not to this point been a character arc that involved Yasmin and her not fucking somebody. She rudely dismisses Sweet Pea in this episode, and it's like, where do you even get off enough to do that? Like, you're not even good enough at your job to be that curt and dismissive with someone else. But she dismisses Sweet Pea in this episode, just like she dismissed Venetia's harassment situation with Nicole last season. Like, so she hasn't changed one bit, and I thought she was about to, but she hasn't. Like, her situation every season consistently has been like, why is the person I'm fucking mistreating me? Like, oh, okay, well, maybe because that's all you bring to the table. But don't get me wrong now. They are doing a little bit here. The idea that her behavior is caused by issues with her father, it's right there on the surface. I see it. So, yeah, they're doing that, and that adds some complexity to all this, a little bit more, makes her a little bit more three-dimensional. But they've also done the exact same thing with Robert and his mother issues. But Robert is an entirely different character right now than he was at the beginning of the season. The beginning of the series. So Robert has done a complete 180 while also carrying along this character theme about mother issues, whereas Yasmin just seems to be completely dominated by daddy issues and fucking, and she just doesn't seem to grow at all. But now that I've introduced talking about Sweet Pea, I think now would be a good time to talk about the other dire situation that's tough to understand due to all the industry lingo, mumbo jumbo that we hear. Both industry, the show, and industry as in the financial industry. But again, full disclaimer here. I'm speaking very broadly because I'm not entirely sure what the fuck is going on. But like I've said before, this show does try to give you a really good opportunity to understand. Like, for example, like when Sweet Pea talks with Eric the very first time, everything she said made no sense to me. Then Eric's like, so what are you saying? It's like I told y'all last week. Like, and actually multiple times this season. It's like they'll say something that doesn't make any sense. Then somebody will say something else, and then that person will then explain the same thing in a way that's a little bit more digestible. So Eric's like, so what are you saying? And then Sweet Pea explains some more. And again, I still wasn't fully there, but I was starting to get it. I'm like, okay, it's starting to crystallize a little bit. And then Eric's like, so 2 + 2 = fuck. And it's like, that's our cue to understand that whatever she just said is really bad for Pierpoint. And generally, that's all industry really gives us, is that knowledge that this equals bad. And then so then when we see it later, we know, oh, well, that's bad. And it's later confirmed to be bad when Eric goes to meet with Adler, and each of these conversations serve to make this picture a little bit more clearer surrounding what's going on. So here, throughout all of these conversations, here's what I picked up. Here's my take on what's happening with Pierpoint. The idea is that Pierpoint took out massive debt to be super invested in these ESGs. I'm assuming because they figured this was going to be the new wave of the future or whatever. Now that debt has almost matured and it's time to pay it back. But as we all know, not only did Lumi fail, but all other ESGs are failing or backing out of working with Pierpoint, and public interest is lost as well. So in short, it sounds to me like as ESGs collapse, so does Pierpoint as well. They won't be able to pay back this debt. We learned from Adler that a new CEO is coming in, and that Adler is expecting a very difficult next few months. My guess is that the new CEO is going to be figuring out how to get him out of this situation. At first, I was ready to hypothesize about it being someone special, but I remember they gave the person's name in the episode. But that's not all, folks. We also know that Harper Stern knows about this as well. She overheard Sweet Pea and Yasmin talking about it, again, in the bathroom. And both Eric and Yasmin suggest that this means... suggested that this information that she got it through illegal means. So now Harper has this vital information that she can use against Eric and her feud with him, or even to her own advantage, or both. I'm sure I'm probably wrong about something in there going on with that, but I mean, that's why I kept it as brief and kind of high level as possible. But by and large, I think that's what's going on here. The preview for next week ends with Petra and Harper telling someone that they want to short Pierpoint, and probably Yasmin or Eric or something. And I think that's really all you need to know about how dire things are for Pierpoint at this point. Before I get into my final thoughts, I want to talk about the costumes on the Pierpoint floor in this episode and what we learn about Yasmin's father as well. I was pretty pleased with my ability to pick out all the costumes, particularly given that some of them are definitely more relevant references in England than they are here. So we've got Sweet Pea, I believe is Ginger Spice from the Spice Girls. Not 100% on that because it's not like it's a very distinguishable costume, but pretty sure that's supposed to be Ginger. I think it was Ginger Spice. The one that's Jerry Halliwell. It's weird I'm more certain about her real name than her Spice Girl name, but that one. We got Anraj. He says something like a generic video game plumber or something like that, but clearly he's supposed to be some version of Mario. We've got Rishi as Ali G. This is perfect. Probably my favorite one. It's almost unrecognizable. Like you actually think it's him for a second. And then lastly, this is the one I was most proud of for getting on my own. Eric as Henry VIII, carrying the head of his wife, Anne Boleyn. We know what Eric has going on with his wife right now too, so him choosing to dress up as a king who beheaded one of his wives is just another example of how this show is giving you information in ways you might not even understand right away. But the only one I didn't get is Yaz here. The wig is given Princess Di, which would be a fitting choice given the show's setting. But what's with the sweater? That's what's throwing me off and making me think it's supposed to be someone else. And I can't say maybe the sweater is not part of the costume, it's just the wig, because Yasmin doesn't normally dress that way at work. So it has to be part of the costume, right? Is it Princess Di on a lazy Saturday? That's so esoteric. But anyway, last thing before I get into a couple of thoughts. Shout out to Orpheus in the Discord for throwing out the theory after the first episode that Yasmin might have killed her father. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm not there yet. I'm not fully bought in, but I think maybe she killed him metaphorically, he's dead because of something she said, or she feels guilty about it. I told him that I didn't care if he just died, and then she's like, now he's dead, so now she feels like she killed him. So maybe it's metaphorical. Maybe it's an accident. Personally, I'm wondering if Harper was involved in any kind of way. We know she was on that boat with Yasmin in episode 1. Is it possible she was involved, or at minimum know something? I don't know. But regardless, we're now at a point where, regardless of how she meant it, Yasmin has admitted to killing him. And as far as I'm concerned, that means Orpheus nailed it. Even if she didn't literally kill him, to guess that after the first episode, be largely met with LOLs, and then to be where we are now, I think that's a win for Orpheus, in my opinion. So shout out to him. Finally, we've reached the end, and I want to close up with a couple of quick thoughts. We learned that one Middle Eastern guy that Adler brought out on the floor personally a few episodes back, he comes from some important family who wants to get a job for him. That's all we learned about him right now. A far less impressive explanation for his presence than I was hoping for, but I'd be willing to bet that guy's going to be really significant later. like maybe he'll have a hand in getting Pierpoint out of this situation with this debt. Because if he's coming from a rich family, who knows? There were a lot of great lines in this episode. I wish I could have written them all down, but I didn't have time for a rewatch since I'm late with this video anyway. But Muck had a few of them. I remember liking the one where he said he can only fuck down. Some really good ones on here. But Robert, he shockingly tells Henry about Yasmin making him eat his own cum, which is still the most shocking moment on this show to me. Back when the show was mostly just violence. That's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen happen in a television show or a movie ever. But look where Robert is now. Look where Robert is now, everybody. But lastly, it was nice to learn that Rob bought that house from money that Clement left him in his will. Again, Robert, most complex character on the show. So that's all I got for this week. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and until next week, peace.